Hello everyone, and welcome back to Occult Perspectives. If you're new to this channel, what I do on here is I break down different esoteric research subjects. We talk about Kabbalah, Freemasonry, the Tree of Life, ceremonial magic, you name it. We break it down, kind of dissect it. We learn how to apply it in a practical way in our daily lives. All of these sorts of things. So be sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and ring the notification bell for future notifications if you get some kind of value from this video, or if you resonate with any of the material that I discuss on here. So in a previous video, I had done the subject of Cagliostro, Count Cagliostro, and Freemasonry. We talked a little bit about his Egyptian rite. Oh, I was hoping I could make this taller, but apparently not. Sorry about that. I think that's as tall as the stand goes. So anyway, this video is going to be a continuation of the discussion on the Masonic magician and Count Cagliostro. I covered a lot of previous material from this book in the last video, where I discussed Count Cagliostro, so make sure you go back and watch that video first. I will most likely put both these videos in a playlist together. That way it's maybe a little bit easier to find. So I'm going to start straight from chapter 9 now. We're going to get straight into the subject matter, the ritual of Egyptian Freemasonry. And I'll mostly just be going through these pages and picking out tidbits of information. I took a little bit of notes on this section, but most of the notes that I wrote down were from the previous sections of this book, which I discussed in the last video on Cagliostro. And I've got me a bowl of fruit here too. I actually went on a run this morning. I ran about probably 2.5 miles or so. Haven't really eaten today, so I figured some blueberries and strawberries would be good. To start off with. Yeah, so I'm going to have to skim through a lot of this material to cover a fair amount of it, in the next, 50 minutes or however long I decide to go with this video. Starting on the first page on chapter 9, the ritual of Egyptian Freemasonry. The following ritual is a full translation of a manuscript held in the Museum of the Grand Lodge of Scotland. Discovered in France by Charles Morrison, a Scottish Freemason and surgeon, whose name is displayed on the front cover of the book. It was donated to the museum following his death. Morrison rescued the ritual of Egyptian Freemasonry and many other texts from destruction when the Masonic lodges of Paris were broken up during the French Revolution in 1789. Cagliostro's ritual of Egyptian Freemasonry, as mentioned in previous chapters, was intended as an enhancement for regular Freemasonry, not as a replacement. So it's basically an additional structure to the original 3 degrees. Structured in a similar way to Freemasonic ritual, both ancient and modern, it is inasmuch as it involves 3 degrees and specific catechisms, questions and answers, directed between the master and candidate. So it kind of tells you how the different officers are set up here. Let's see, we're on page 196. I'll just read a little bit of a paragraph from each of these pages. To all those who will see these present letters, we do let it be known that during the time we have stayed in Lyon, Lyon, Several members of a lodge of this orient, following the ordinary rite and bearing the distinctive title of La Sagesse, Sagesse, wisdom, having demonstrated to us the strong desire which they had to submit themselves to our regime and to receive from us the light and the power necessary to know, to prosper, and to propagate Freemasonry in its true form and its primitive purity. It goes on and continues there. So as you can see, it's just kind of going over like some of the foundational things as far as how they set up these lodges and who the officers are and things of that nature. Nothing super interesting. I'll read another little section from the next page. We grant to these officers once and for all we grant to these officers once and for all time the right and power to hold an Egyptian lodge with the brethren, subject to their direction, to carry out all receptions to apprentices, companions, and master masons, Egyptian masons, to issue certificates, to maintain relations and correspondence with all the masons of our right, and the lodges upon which they depend, in whatever place on earth they may be situated. This is a long sentence. To affiliate after examination and the formalities prescribed by ourselves, the brethren of the ordinary rite, who would wish to embrace our regime, in a word, to exercise generally all the rights which may appertain and do appertain to the true and perfect Egyptian lodge, having the title and prerogatives and authority of a mother lodge. So just all these long like preambles about, once again, the structure and the titles of everything and how everything's like issued. And a lot of it's just a lot of formality, and I don't know, there's a bunch of just extra stuff on top of the deeper teachings or the deeper understanding. So that's what I'm going to try to get to instead of just all of the administrative stuff. I'm on page 198 now. So from page 198 to 203, these are all the rules and stuff. So we can just read, I'll just read like a couple of these rules. The first one says, our master sat in our midst and said, you shall reject the heartless man who does not believe in the supreme being or in the immortality of the soul. He would sully the temple and its precincts. So that's rule number 1. Let's skip to the 25th rule. The officer shall be appointed for life and shall select on the advice of the central chamber and from amongst those who comprise its membership a substitute who shall be their replacement in case of absence and shall be by right their successor in the event of death or retirement. Interesting. Once again, if you're looking for the title of this book, I discussed it in depth in the last video that I talk about this. But Count Cagliostro, the Masonic magician, and the author of this book is Philippa Falks and Robert L.D. Cooper. Okay, and then the 40th rule, I'll go ahead and read that. You shall read at each of your general assemblies the statutes and rules which I give you. Okay, so a bunch of just administrative type stuff. Pages of interest I wrote was 212. Okay, so I guess I'll go ahead and skip to that in a minute. So on page 204, there's the reception and the opening of the lodge. I'll read little bits of sections from this. So, and this is typical of any mystery school, whether it's Golden Dawn, Freemasonry, OTO, whatever it is. There's usually the reception of the candidate, upon entering the temple or whatever. The candidate having been agreed, he shall be placed in the chamber of reflection, in the middle of which shall be a large tracing board, having in its center a large pyramid, at the base of which shall be a cavern. Before this cavern shall be represented the figure of time. The figure of time in the form of an old man with a look of terror on his face and having difficulty in entering this cavern. On the left of this tracing board shall be represented the horn of plenty. To the right, some chains and philosophical instruments. So the horn of plenty, I'm guessing they're talking about the cornucopia, which I think has connections to Capricorn, possibly. And it's also the top of a steward's staff in Freemasonry, interestingly enough. So I'll go to the next page, page 205. This is opening the lodge. The worshipful master, having taken his seat, the strictest silence shall be observed. It is forbidden to blow one's nose, and even more so to speak. So they're really strict in this Egyptian lodge. When the worshipful master rises, all shall rise at the same time. He shall have his sword in his right hand, and it shall not leave his hand while he is speaking. He shall say, "To order, my brethren. In the name of the great God, let us open this lodge according to the right and constitutions of the Grand Copt, our founder." I don't know if it's Grand Copt or Grand Copt. Probably Grand Copt. Some kind of Egyptian title for Cagliostro. Then the worshipful master gives a speech on the next page. The worshipful master, having given the order to the candidate, given the order to have the candidate brought in, the grand inspector shall conduct him before the throne, where he shall cause him to kneel. Then there's the administration of the oath. And then there's like a series of questions and answers that the Egyptian Freemason would have to answer. So on page 207, are you an Egyptian Mason? Yes, I am, with strength and singleness of purpose. From what place do you come? From the depth of the east. What have you observed there? The immense power of our founder. What did he teach you? The knowledge of God and myself. Interesting. So the founder of their order, I'm assuming he's talking about Cagliostro himself, so he must have performed some rites. Or we were talking in the last video about how he was able to supposedly, create the Philosopher's Stone. So, interesting things to think about. So I'm going to go ahead and skip to page 212. Freemasonry has as its father Enoch and Elias. After having been invested with a sublime power which was accorded to them by the divinity, they implored his goodness and mercy on behalf of their neighbors, so that they could be permitted to communicate his greatness to other men, and the power which he accorded to man above all the beings which surround his throne. Having obtained this permission, they chose 12 dependents, whom they called elect of God, one of which, known to you, was called Solomon. So which part of I'm trying to figure out which part of the ceremony this is. So this is still a question and answer. This is still a question and answer thing. Very interesting. Let me go back to the question. Your goodness increases my gratitude, and your enlightenment increases my respect. Permit me hereafter, rendering you greater justice, to substitute the name of master for that of brother. I beseech you then, my dear master, to follow your part and to commence by instructing me as to the origin of true Freemasonry. And that's what I was just reading. Freemasonry has as its father Enoch and Elias. I'm not going to read all that again. Having obtained this permission, they chose 12 dependents, whom they called elect of God, one of which, known to you, was called Solomon. This philosopher king, after having been inspired, sought to imitate and walk in the path of these two masters by forming a company of men fitted to preserve and propagate the sublime wisdom they had acquired. Counseling with the other elect, it was agreed that each of them would choose 2 dependents, making in all 24 companions, the first of whom was Boaz. These 24 companions had then the liberty to elect 3, whom they called apprentices, which made 2 supreme chiefs, 12 masters or elect of God, 24 companions, and 72 apprentices. So those are pretty symbolic numbers. These 24 companions elect 3, whom they call apprentices, which made 2 supreme chiefs. 12 masters or elect of God, the zodiac, 24 companions, and 72. So 12, 24, and 72. Makes me think of the art the zodiacal archangels, and then the 72 angels of the Shem operation, and it's 24 the deacons. I can't remember what the case is with the 24. I just know it's 12 twice. Interesting. Let me go back and read this sentence again. These 24 companions had then the liberty to elect 3, whom they called apprentices, which made 2 supreme chiefs, 12 masters or elect of God, 24 companions, and 72 apprentices. From these last are descended the Templars, and from one of the Templars who took refuge in Scotland, the Freemasons, who were in principle 13 in number, then 33, etc. Interesting. Such is the origin and affiliation of Masonry. So there you go. For those of you wondering, according to the Egyptian rituals, anyway, of Cagliostro. This report leaving me nothing to desire, let us pass on, I beg of you, to the explanation of the Masonic ceremonies and the tracing board. On entering the lodge, why was I blindfolded? In order to make you understand that any man who does not possess the higher wisdom which I am teaching you is a blind, restricted man, but having a worshipful master as his master, he shall pass out of the dark shadows and know the truth. So let me skip to now bottom of page 213. What is the purpose of the triangle? To teach you that omni trinum a perfectum, all 3 are perfect. What do the 2 columns mean? These 2 columns, called Jachin and Boaz, are not 2 columns at all, but in fact 2 men who sought to learn about natural and supernatural philosophy. Very interesting. Solomon, having not found in the first of these the qualities required of a true Mason, he was rejected and placed in an inferior class. Interesting. On the contrary, let me read that again. Solomon, having not found in the first of these the qualities required of a true Mason, he was rejected and placed in an inferior class. On the contrary, Boaz, having been fortunate enough to recognize the significance of the acacia by the pleasure of God, and with the aid of Solomon, succeeded not only in ridding the rough ashlar of all its impurities, but also in rendering it cubical, and finally in causing it to become triangular or more than perfect. Interesting. So something to do with alchemy there. You start with, well, they talked about the acacia, which is, we've talked about that a lot on this channel. It's emblematic of immortality and things of that nature. P.D. Newman talks a lot about it. So you render it cubical, and then finally you make it triangular or more than perfect. Very interesting. Page 214. I beseech you to explain more clearly to me the significance of the different stones. I know that although on the tracing board there is 1 rough stone, 1 cubical, and 1 triangular, but all this being an enigma to me, I beg you to give me the key. This is it. The acacia is the primal matter, or the prima materia. You should check out R.C. Frater and P.D. Newman, what they have to say on that. When this rough ashlar or mercurial part has been thoroughly purified, it becomes cubical. It is then, with this primal matter or this dagger in your hand, that you must assassinate this master, this rough ashlar which has become cubical, or this father and this mother of all the metals. Interesting. So yeah, it's all this alchemical terminology. This operation being finished and the body enshrouded, it is now a question of purifying it by following the 7 philosophical transitions, which are symbolized by the 7 steps placed before the door of the temple. The first 5, which are the primary colors, the 6th, which is the color black, and finally the 7th, which is that of purple or fire, which is that of purple, of fire, or of fresh blood. It is thus that you may bring about the consummation of the marriage of the sun and moon, and that you shall obtain the triangular stone and thus the perfect projection. And then it has a Latin phrase here. I believe it's Latin, maybe. As much as you need and as much as you have appetite for. Very interesting. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through different sections here in the next few pages, and then I'll probably go ahead and end the video. I was going to go a little bit longer, but I don't think I'm going to do a super long video. And then what I'll do is I'll create a playlist. So if I decide to continue reading from this book, I'll just continue reading from the same section if we do decide to continue this series. So I'll leave it open there and then see where we go from there. So blueberries, so refreshing. Sorry about that. So a lot of this I'm reading here, it sounds interesting, but it's all some kind of, it's all like an alchemical metaphor, essentially is what it is. So it's a lot of mystical talk. They're mentioning the name Adonai. Solomon, having noticed him, asked him what he was looking for. Adoniram was the son of Erebus Raham, and he was called Joachim. Raham, so the father, who was working on the superstitions part of Masonry. That almost seems like a typo. Had imparted some information to his son, but he, protected and favored by God, having come to a knowledge of the superior power possessed by Solomon, both in natural and in supernatural philosophy, left the north and came to the south. So from the earth, direction of earth, to the south, which is where the high noon, where the great king resided, the sun, and in the hope of attracting attention to himself, he stationed himself at the door of the temple. Solomon, having noticed him, asked him what he was looking for, to which he replied, Adonai, and that's one of the sacred god names in the lesser ritual of the pentagram. Adonai, the king, inspired by God and touched by the respect and veneration shown by this mortal being, and thus using with confidence the name Adonai, which is the sacred name of the divinity, not only welcomed him with goodness and beneficence, but even caused him to enter with him into the temple. And knowing that he was well versed in the metallic part, he confided to him the primal matter and changed his name from Joachim to Adoniram, which in the Arabic language signifies son of God or son of Raham, or worker in metals. Very interesting. So there's more about that story too, which I'm not really going to read. It's talking about the blazing star. The star is the emblem of the great mysteries revealed in supernatural philosophy, and it is a new proof of the blindness and ignorance of modern Masons, because it ought to be terminated by 7 points or 7 angles. And you shall never see it represented in any lodge except by 3, 5, or 6 angles. That's interesting. Besides, these poor children of the widow have never discovered any other merit in it than that of containing the letter G, which they have spiritually explained by the word geometry. Such is the fruit of 100 years of reflection and the marvelous interpretation of 7 angels who surround the throne of divinity, and the letter G is the presence of the sacred name of the great God called Jehovah, Adonai, etc. Interesting. Grant me, I beseech you, a more profound knowledge of these 7 primitive angels. These 7 angels are the intermediaries between ourselves and the divinity. They are the 7 planets, or more correctly, they direct or govern each of the 7 planets, as they have a particular and fixed influence on each of the realms necessary for the perfection of the primal matter. The existence of these 7 superior angels is as real as the fact that man has the power to control these same beings. Very interesting. My astonishment cannot but increase, like my eagerness to learn more. The existence of these 7 superior angels is as real as the fact that man has the power to control these same beings. But how is it possible for man to command and obey and be obeyed by these angelic creatures? God, having created man in his own image and likeness, his is the most perfect of all his works, and as long as man preserved his innocence and his purity, he was, after the divinity, the most powerful and superior, and God had not only given him the knowledge of these intermediaries, he had also conferred on him the power to rule and govern them immediately after himself. Interesting. Man having degenerated by abusing this great power, God deprived him of that superiority. He made him mortal and denied him knowledge of these intermediary beings. Very interesting. Were the elect of God made exceptions to this general judgment? Yes, they were the only ones to whom God has granted the grace to enjoy the wisdom and all the power that he had conferred upon the first man. So, kind of an interesting, way of looking at it. There are quote-unquote chosen ones. Who are quote-unquote exempt from this general judgment. So that's interesting to think about. I don't really have an opinion on it one way or the other. You hear about the 144,000 and the chosen ones all the time. I'm not well enough educated on that subject to really talk about it. But what I do know is it seems like there are only a certain amount of real souls out there. And then it almost seems like the rest of it's like a simulation. It's really kind of weird like that sometimes. So there could be some truth to that there are only so many, you could call them quote unquote chosen souls. But as far as how deep that topic goes, I'm pretty ignorant of the whole story behind that. So, but it's interesting things to think about. So this whole, his whole degree system and the exercises and the rituals that they end up, performing or whatever, these are all supposed to be purification rites, which allow essentially the person to, here, it says right here, every good and true Mason, such as I, glory in being, may he hope to be regenerated and to become one of the elect of God. Question mark? Yes, without doubt, but besides the necessity of practicing all the moral virtues in the highest degree, such as charity and benevolence, etc., it is further necessary that God, sensible of your adoration, your respect, your submission, and your fervent prayers, should move and determine one of his elect to assist you, to instruct you, and to render you worthy of this supreme happiness. For one of the 12 elect, being in repose or being called to the presence of the divinity, the most virtuous of the 24 companions succeeds him. Likewise, the wisest of the 72 apprentices takes the place left vacant by the companion. Interesting. So there's obviously this hierarchy that's going on. There's a lot of view as seeing God almost separate from yourself, or it's you're trying to reconnect with your higher self, which is ultimate source. I'm assuming, that's what the whole idea of this is, but I think one of the things that you can get caught up with in groups like this is, something as strict as this Egyptian rite is. It could, basically it would have to be your whole life. Your whole life is dedicated to basically transmuting your entire existence into a quote unquote higher vibration. And, you do have to think what are the ultimate, what cosmic or extraterrestrial forces are you working with at the end of the day, and what is the ultimate agenda of these forces, this is always something, you know, that is interesting to take into account. I'll read just a little bit more and then I'll go ahead and end this video, and then we can pick this back up later if we want to. Do me the favor of explaining more clearly to me what you mean by the purification of man, and what are the means by which this can be achieved. First, it is necessary to being by knowing the spiritual symbols, the invocations to God, the manner of dressing, and the method it is necessary to create and prepare the implements of the art, in accordance with the planetary influences. For henceforth, instead of speaking to you of these 7 angels, I shall use the name of the planets, so that you shall better understand me. So a lot of working with the Tree of Life, and a lot of these archangels are the same as the Tree of Life ones, I believe. I don't see the list of them yet, but we'll get to that eventually. If I did not cover it in the last video, I don't think I did. For henceforth, instead of speaking to you of these 7 angels, I shall use the names of the planets, so that you shall better understand me. The first implement is the same trowel which you always see in the hands of Freemasons, the compass, the knife, the sword, and all the necessary tools. One must know what is the day of the month and the hours which are the most propitious for the influence of the most suitable planet. It is also necessary to be informed of the day of the month and the most favorable hours for the benediction of the silken cloth. One must know the prayers which must be addressed to God, the invocations to the angels, and the means of taking sufficient control over oneself in order to repel and destroy all the doubts which sully your body and your mind. By conducting yourself precisely in accordance with these procedures, you shall succeed in divesting yourself totally of the physical part. You shall be perfectly purified in accordance with the methods of the elect of God, and with the attributes in your right hand and the assistance of the Master whom God has given to you, you shall without doubt attain the grace to enter into the sanctuary of truth. Very interesting. We just hit 33 minutes too. That's really cool. So I'm ending this video on page 218. Might end up covering more of it. But yeah, there's this whole like rejection of the physical aspects of yourself. So the philosophy of this is much more like I've said before, I hate using the term, but quote unquote more right-hand path, or more about kind of rejecting the more carnal or physical aspects of self to become more etheric in a sense. So, all right, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you please did, be sure to share it with like-minded people. Like the video. Be sure to subscribe. Go and check out my Patreon if you haven't checked out that yet already as well. And thank you very much for being here and watching this video. So I hope to have more content coming soon. It'll probably be another 4 or 5 days before I have any more content. But until then, everyone, peace, take care, wherever you are, day or night, and have a great one. Thank you.